The supply truck's diesel engine coughed to life in the pre-dawn darkness of Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Kestrel Navar adjusted her Kevlar helmet and hefted another crate of MREs into the cargo bed, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid mountain air. Just another routine supply run to Forward Operating Base Chapman, she thought. Just another day of hauling cargo while the real pilots flew overhead in their F-16s and A-10s. She'd been doing this for 6 months now. Ground logistics, convoy escort, the unglamorous work that kept the war machine fed and fueled. Nobody looked twice at the compact woman with dirt-brown hair pulled back in regulation fashion, her flight suit bearing the subdued patches of the 455th Air Expeditionary Wing. To everyone else, she was just another support airman, invisible in the vast machinery of Operation Enduring Freedom. Colonel Marcus Thorne approached through the motor pool's harsh fluorescent lighting, his polished boots clicking against the concrete. He was new to the base, a by-the-book career officer making his rounds, ensuring everything ran with military precision. His eyes swept over the convoy preparation with practiced efficiency, checking manifests, inspecting vehicles, nodding at the familiar choreography of departure. Then he saw her patch. The colonel's stride faltered. His clipboard slipped slightly in his grip as his gaze fixed on the small embroidered insignia sewn above Kestrel's right breast pocket. It wasn't the standard Air Force wings or her name tape that had stopped him cold. It was something else entirely, a distinctive unit patch that shouldn't exist on a logistics sergeant's uniform, a patch that told a story few were authorized to know. The 64th Aggressor Squadron, the Ghost Riders, a unit that officially didn't exist, operating aircraft that weren't supposed to fly, piloting missions that never appeared in any official records. The colonel's face drained of color as recognition dawned. He'd heard whispers in classified briefings, fragments of stories from his days at the Pentagon. Stories about a pilot who'd done something extraordinary over the mountains of Afghanistan. Something that had earned a unit citation, so classified it couldn't even be properly acknowledged. Kestrel noticed his stare and straightened, expecting the usual questions about her assignment or cargo manifest. Instead, the colonel approached with careful, measured steps, his entire demeanor transformed. The clipboard trembled almost imperceptibly in his hands. "Sergeant," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "where exactly did you earn that patch?" The question hung in the thin mountain air like a prayer, heavy with implications neither of them could speak aloud. In that moment, the routine supply run became something else entirely. The past, it seemed, had finally caught up with Staff Sergeant Kestrel Navar. Kestrel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as she met the colonel's gaze. She'd spent months perfecting the art of invisibility, of blending into the background noise of military bureaucracy. The patch was supposed to be retired, buried along with the memories and the nightmares. But some things, she realized, could never truly be hidden. "With respect, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest, "that's classified above your pay grade." The words came out harder than she'd intended, carrying the weight of secrets she'd sworn never to reveal. Around them, the motor pool continued its morning ritual, engines warming, radios crackling, personnel moving with purpose through the controlled chaos of deployment. Colonel Thorne stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sergeant, I held a top-secret clearance at CENTCOM. I know about Operation Distant Thunder. I know about what happened over the Khyber Pass." His eyes searched her face for recognition, for some crack in the carefully constructed facade she'd built around herself. The wrench slipped from Kestrel's grip, clanging against the truck's metal bed. For just a moment her composure fractured. Distant Thunder, a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in over a year, a name that still woke her at 3 a.m., sweating through regulation sheets in her cramped quarters. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir," she said, but her voice carried the hollowness of practiced denial. She bent to retrieve the wrench, using the motion to steady herself. When she straightened, the mask was back in place, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The colonel studied her with new eyes, seeing past the mundane uniform and unremarkable assignment. This wasn't just another logistics sergeant loading supplies. This was someone who'd flown into hell itself and somehow made it back. Someone whose real story was locked away in classified files that most officers would never see. "Your crew chief is looking for you," he said finally, though no crew chief had appeared. It was an offering, a graceful exit from a conversation that had already gone too far. "Carry on, Sergeant." But as he walked away, Colonel Thorne's mind was already racing. He'd served long enough to recognize the signs, the hypervigilance, the careful control, the way her eyes instinctively tracked aircraft movements even while performing ground duties. This woman had secrets, and those secrets had a way of surfacing when least expected. Kestrel watched him go, her knuckles white against the truck's tailgate. 6 months of careful anonymity, shattered by a patch she should have removed long ago. But she couldn't bring herself to cut those threads, to completely sever the connection to who she'd been before everything changed. The Ghost Rider's patch was all she had left of the pilot she used to be. The morning sun crested the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting the airfield in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the distance, an F-16 thundered down the runway, its afterburners cutting through the dawn silence. Kestrel closed her eyes and felt the familiar ache of wings she no longer wore. In the distance, Colonel Thorne was already reaching for his secure phone. Some stories, he knew, demanded to be told, and some pilots deserved better than anonymity in a motor pool, no matter what demons they were trying to outrun. The convoy rolled out 40 minutes later, dust clouds rising behind the heavy trucks as they navigated the perimeter road toward the main gate. Kestrel rode shotgun in the lead vehicle, her M4 carbine resting across her lap, eyes scanning the barren landscape with practiced efficiency. To the casual observer, she was just another soldier performing another routine mission. But the colonel's recognition had shifted something fundamental, like a fault line disturbing long-dormant ground. Sergeant First Class Dale Kowalski handled the wheel with the easy competence of someone who'd driven these roads 100 times before. He was career Army, a lifer who'd served 3 deployments and planned to serve 3 more. To him, the Air Force passengers were just cargo with opinions, necessary but unremarkable additions to his convoy. "You're quiet today, Navarre," he observed, downshifting as they approached a checkpoint. The Afghan National Army guards waved them through with tired familiarity. "Usually you're giving me grief about my driving by now." Kestrel managed a tight smile. "Just thinking about home," she lied. In truth, she was thinking about the last time she'd flown this route, 30,000 feet above it, in an aircraft that officially didn't exist, on a mission that never happened. The landscape looked different from ground level, flatter and more menacing. The mountains that had once been distant reference points now loomed overhead like sleeping giants. Her radio crackled to life. "Convoy Alpha, this is Tower. Be advised, we have reports of unusual activity in Sector 7. Maintain heightened awareness." Kowalski reached for the handset. "Tower, Convoy Alpha, define unusual activity." "Local nationals reporting aircraft sounds after midnight. No scheduled flights in that sector. Could be nothing, but stay sharp out there." Kestrel's blood chilled. Aircraft sounds after midnight in an unmonitored sector could mean only one thing: someone was flying black operations, unauthorized missions under the cover of darkness. The kind of missions she used to fly before everything went wrong. "Copy Tower, Convoy Alpha maintaining course." The truck's engine droned steadily as they climbed into the foothills, the road winding through terrain that had claimed countless vehicles over the decades. Soviet BMPs still rusted in the valleys below, monuments to previous occupations and their failures. American Humvees would eventually join them, Kestrel reflected grimly. The mountains consumed everything eventually. 20 miles ahead, Fob Chapman sat like a concrete island in an ocean of hostility. It was a small outpost, barely 200 personnel, but it served as a crucial logistics hub for operations deeper in the provinces. Getting supplies there safely was routine work, the kind of mission that happened dozens of times each month without incident. But routine had a way of becoming extraordinary without warning. And in the back of her mind, Kestrel couldn't shake the feeling that the colonel's recognition had set something in motion, something that would shatter the careful anonymity she'd built around herself like armor. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was different, younger, more urgent. Any station, this is Viper 1-1. We have an emergency situation developing. Request immediate assistance. The convoy rolled through a narrow pass between two ridges, the walls of stone rising sharply on either side. It was the kind of terrain that made convoy commanders nervous. Limited visibility, restricted maneuver space, perfect for an ambush. Kestrel's grip tightened on her carbine as Kowalski slowed to navigate a series of switchbacks carved into the mountainside decades earlier by Soviet engineers. The radio transmission had everyone's attention now. Emergency situations in this sector were rarely minor inconveniences. They usually involved contact with hostile forces, mechanical failures in dangerous territory, or worse, casualties that needed immediate evacuation. Viper 1-1, this is Overwatch. State your position and nature of emergency. The response came through heavy static. Overwatch, Viper 1-1. We have a bird down, repeat, aircraft down approximately 15 clicks northwest of Chapman. Single pilot, status unknown. Request immediate search and rescue. Kestrel felt her heart rate spike. A downed aircraft meant a pilot somewhere in those mountains, possibly injured, definitely vulnerable. In her previous life, she would have been part of the rescue mission, flying low and fast through dangerous terrain to extract a fallen comrade. Now she was just another passenger in a supply convoy, useful only for her cargo capacity. Kowalski met her eyes in the rearview mirror. You know anything about that, Navarre? Thought you Air Force types kept track of your birds. She shook her head, but her mind was racing. The timing was too convenient. Unusual aircraft activity the night before, and now a downed bird in the same general area. This wasn't a routine training accident or mechanical failure. This felt like something darker, more complex. Viper 1-1, Overwatch. Can you confirm aircraft type and unit designation? A long pause. When the voice returned, it carried the weight of bad news. Overwatch, aircraft appears to be unconventional, no standard markings. Pilot extraction is critical priority. Unconventional aircraft. No standard markings. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. Someone was flying black operations in her old hunting grounds, and now they were paying the price. The question was whether this was official business or something else entirely, something that might explain why a colonel had recognized her patch and started making phone calls. The convoy crested the final ridge before the descent to Fob Chapman. Below them, the small base spread across a natural plateau like a medieval fortress, surrounded by HESCO barriers and razor wire. Normally, the site brought relief, mission accomplished, supplies delivered, another day completed without incident. But today felt different. Today carried the weight of unfinished business and secrets that refused to stay buried. As they began the descent, Kestrel found herself scanning the sky with old instincts, looking for aircraft that shouldn't be there, listening for engines that never appeared on flight schedules. Fob Chapman's main gate appeared ahead, flanked by guard towers and multiple checkpoints. Home, at least for the next few hours. But as they approached the perimeter, Kestrel couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed new life was about to collide with the ghosts of her past. The supply convoy rolled through Chapman's outer perimeter just as the base's emergency klaxon began to wail. Personnel scattered across the compound with practiced urgency, some heading for defensive positions while others rushed toward the helicopter landing pad. The rescue mission was already mobilizing, medics preparing trauma kits, aircraft crews conducting pre-flight checks, operations personnel coordinating search patterns. Kestrel watched the choreography through the truck's dusty windshield with the eye of someone who'd once been part of that machine. She could read the urgency in their movements, the controlled panic that came with knowing a pilot was down somewhere in hostile territory. Time was the enemy now. Every minute that passed reduced the chances of a successful rescue. Kowalski parked the lead truck near the supply depot and killed the engine. "Well, looks like we picked an interesting day to visit," he said, nodding toward the activity around the landing pad. Two Black Hawks were spinning up, their rotors beginning to blur as pilots completed their pre-flight sequences. "Always something in this place," Kestrel replied, but her attention was fixed on the aircraft preparations. She could identify the specific helicopter variant by sound alone, a 60M Black Hawks, the latest iteration of the venerable Sikorsky design. Fast, reliable, and capable of operating in the high-altitude environment of Afghanistan's mountains. Good choice for a search and rescue mission. The convoy's other passengers began unloading cargo, while Kestrel found herself drawn toward the operations center. She told herself she was just curious, but the truth was more complex. The downed pilot could be someone she knew, someone from her previous life. The military aviation community was smaller than most people realized, especially at the classified levels where she'd once operated. Captain Lisa Rodriguez emerged from the operations bunker, her flight suit marked with the distinctive patches of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. She was coordinating the search mission, a tablet computer in one hand and a radio handset in the other. "Search Grid Alpha through Charlie," she was saying into the radio. "Primary focus on the northwestern approach to the pass. Aircraft went down somewhere in that 10-kilometer box." Kestrel approached carefully, using the universal military excuse of looking for a restroom. But as she passed within earshot, Rodriguez's next transmission stopped her cold. "Negative, we do not have positive identification on the aircraft type. Appears to be some kind of modified platform, possibly foreign manufacture or heavily customized. Pilot identification is also unknown at this time." Modified platform, foreign manufacture. The pieces of the puzzle were becoming clearer, and none of them pointed toward routine operations. Someone had been flying experimental or unauthorized aircraft in her old territory, and now that bird was scattered across the mountains with its pilot missing. Rodriguez noticed her listening and fixed her with a sharp look. "Can I help you, Sergeant?" "Just looking for the head, ma'am," Kestrel replied, but something in her expression must have caught the captain's attention. Rodriguez studied her face with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading situations quickly and accurately. "Your Air Force," Rodriguez observed. "What's your background, maintenance, logistics?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kestrel could deflect, maintain her cover, continue pretending to be just another support airman passing through. Or she could take a step toward the truth, toward the pilot she used to be before everything went wrong. "Pilot," she said simply, "or I was." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Captain Rodriguez's expression shifted immediately. The tablet computer lowered to her side as she took a half-step closer, studying Kestrel with new intensity. "Current qualification status." "Inactive," Kestrel replied, the word tasting bitter. "Medical hold pending review." It was technically true, though the medical hold was more psychological than physical. Some wounds didn't show up on X-rays or blood tests. "What platforms?" Rodriguez pressed, her voice carrying the professional curiosity of one pilot evaluating another. Kestrel hesitated. The honest answer would open doors she'd spent months trying to keep closed. But something about the urgency of the moment, the knowledge that another pilot was down somewhere in those mountains, compelled her toward truth. "Multiple," she said finally. "Fixed wing rotary some. Specialized platforms. Rodriguez's eyebrows rose. Specialized platforms was military speak for aircraft that operated in the gray areas of official acknowledgement. Black projects, experimental designs, platforms that existed but couldn't be discussed in normal military channels. The captain stepped closer, lowering her voice. We could use another set of eyes on this search, someone with local knowledge. She paused, studying Kestrel's reaction. Someone who understands unconventional operations. The offer hung between them like a bridge across a chasm. Kestrel could feel the weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. For months, she'd been running from her past, hiding in the anonymous safety of ground assignments. Now that past was calling her back, demanding she choose between comfortable invisibility and the possibility of saving a fallen pilot. Around them, the base continued its urgent preparations. The Black Hawks were nearly ready for departure, their rotors creating small dust storms across the landing pad. Radio chatter filled the air with coordinates, weather reports, and tactical assessments. Time was running out for whoever was down in those mountains. Kestrel looked up at the peaks surrounding Fob Chapman, their snow-covered summits gleaming in the afternoon sun. Somewhere up there, a pilot was waiting for rescue, trusting in the ancient brotherhood of aviators that demanded no one be left behind. She'd once been part of that brotherhood, before fear and guilt had driven her to ground. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. The words came out steadier than she felt, but they carried the weight of commitment. Captain Rodriguez smiled, the first genuine expression Kestrel had seen since arriving at Chapman. "First, I need to know exactly what kind of specialized platforms you've flown, because this downed bird isn't showing up in any of our aircraft recognition manuals." The question struck at the heart of everything Kestrel had been trying to forget. The Ghost Riders hadn't flown conventional aircraft. Their missions required platforms that officially didn't exist, modified beyond recognition, equipped with systems that appeared in no technical manuals. She'd spent 2 years learning to fly aircraft that had no names, only project designations and security classifications that went beyond top secret. "That's complicated," she said. Rodriguez nodded as if she'd expected that answer. "Most of the important stuff is complicated. Come on, let's talk somewhere more private." They walked toward a smaller operations bunker at the edge of the compound, past personnel who were too focused on the rescue mission to pay attention to two women having a quiet conversation. But Kestrel could feel the weight of scrutiny from other directions. The colonel's recognition that morning had started something, and word was spreading through the invisible networks that connected military professionals across unit boundaries. Inside the bunker, Rodriguez pulled up a tactical display showing the search area. Red markers indicated the last known position of the downed aircraft, while blue symbols tracked the positions of the incoming rescue helicopters. It was a standard search and rescue plot, the kind used for thousands of similar missions across decades of military operations. "Here's what we know," Rodriguez began, her finger tracing the flight path on the display. Aircraft was detected on radar for approximately 30 seconds at 3:47 hours, flying low-level through this valley system. No flight plan, no radio contact, no identification. Then it disappeared. She switched to a topographical view that showed the terrain in stark relief, jagged peaks, narrow valleys, and sparse vegetation at altitudes that challenged both aircraft and personnel. It was unforgiving country, the kind of place where survival measured in hours rather than days. "Ground sensors picked up an impact signature here," she continued, marking a point roughly 15 kilometers from Chapman. "But when our first reconnaissance flight reached the area this morning, they found something unusual." Rodriguez pulled up a series of photographs taken from the air. The images showed scattered wreckage across a steep mountainside, but the debris pattern was strange, too dispersed, too small for a conventional aircraft crash. Kestrel studied the photos with growing concern. She'd seen enough crash sites to recognize the signatures of different failure modes. Catastrophic structural failure, engine fire, controlled flight into terrain. Each left distinctive patterns in the wreckage. But these photos showed something different, something that suggested the aircraft had come apart in flight rather than on impact. "This wasn't a mechanical failure," she said quietly. "Something brought this bird down." Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. "That's our assessment too. Which brings us to the next question. What kind of aircraft were they flying, and why was it in our airspace without authorization?" The implications were troubling. Unauthorized aircraft in a combat zone represented a serious security breach, possibly indicating enemy action or, worse, some kind of rogue operation. But Kestrel's experience suggested a third possibility, one that might explain the colonel's reaction to her patch that morning. "Show me the radar track again," she requested. Rodriguez complied, displaying the brief radar signature that had detected the unknown aircraft. Kestrel studied the data with professional interest, noting the speed, altitude, and flight characteristics. The pattern was familiar, consistent with low-level penetration tactics designed to avoid detection. "This is how we used to fly," she said, the admission coming before she could stop herself. "Ghost Rider's protocol. Stay below the radar horizon, use terrain masking, minimize electronic signatures." Rodriguez's expression sharpened. "Ghost Riders? I've never heard that designation." "You wouldn't have," Kestrel replied. "We didn't officially exist." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that both women understood but couldn't speak directly. Black operations, compartmentalized programs, missions that happened in the spaces between official acknowledgement and plausible deniability. The kind of work that left no paper trails and no survivors to tell inconvenient stories. Around them, the bunker's radio systems continued their steady chatter of search and rescue coordination. But the conversation between the two pilots had shifted into more dangerous territory, the realm of classified operations and institutional secrets that could destroy careers or worse. Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. She reached for a secure phone mounted on the bunker's wall, one that connected directly to higher headquarters through encrypted channels. Her finger hesitated over the dial pad as she met Kestrel's eyes. "I think it's time to make some calls," she said. "Whatever this is, it's bigger than a simple search and rescue mission, and I have a feeling you know more about it than you're telling me." The secure phone's dial tone echoed in the small bunker like a death knell. Some secrets, once disturbed, refused to stay buried. And some pilots, no matter how far they ran from their past, eventually found themselves called back to account for the missions they'd flown and the prices they'd paid. Outside, the Black Hawks lifted off in formation, their rotors beating the air with mechanical precision as they headed toward the mountains where a downed pilot waited for rescue. But inside the operations bunker, two women were about to uncover something far more dangerous than a simple aircraft accident. The secure line connected with a distinctive electronic warble that indicated encryption was active. Rodriguez spoke in the clipped tones of military professionalism, but Kestrel could hear the tension underlying her words. "Operational Command, this is Chapman Base Operations. We have a developing situation that requires immediate classification review." The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative. "Chapman Operations, this is Colonel Hayes, duty officer. State the nature of your situation." Rodriguez glanced at Kestrel before responding. "Sir, we have a downed aircraft with unknown configuration and possible connections to classified programs. Request guidance on information handling and search parameters." A pause. Then, "Chapman Operations, you are directed to maintain operational security and limit information sharing to essential personnel only. What is the current status of rescue operations?" "Two birds airborne, ETA to crash site 15 minutes. However, sir, we have a situation that may require specialized consultation. Rodriguez's eyes remained fixed on Kestrel. We have personnel on base with relevant background knowledge. Another pause, longer this time. When Colonel Hayes spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, the careful neutrality of someone navigating political minefields. Chapman Operations. You are directed to secure any personnel with specialized knowledge and maintain them under operational control until further notice. Do not, repeat, do not allow any information regarding this incident to leave base communications channels. The line went dead with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the bunker. Rodriguez replaced the handset slowly, her expression troubled. "Well," she said finally, "it looks like you're not going anywhere for a while." Kestrel had expected this. The moment she'd admitted knowledge of Ghost Rider protocols, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The military had ways of dealing with inconvenient knowledge, and those ways rarely prioritized individual freedom over institutional security. "How long?" she asked. "Until someone with more authority than me decides what to do with you," Rodriguez replied. "Could be hours, could be days. Depends on how deep this rabbit hole goes." Outside the bunker, the sounds of normal base operations continued. Vehicles moving, personnel calling to each other, aircraft engines in the distance. But inside this small space, two women were trapped in a web of classifications and compartmentalization that had been designed to protect national secrets at any cost. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission from the search helicopters. "Chapman Operations, this is Rescue 17. We have reached the crash site. Situation is unusual. Recommend secure channel for further communication." Rodriguez reached for a different handset, one connected to encrypted tactical frequencies. "Rescue 17, Chapman Operations, switch to TAC 4. The frequency change took only seconds, but when the pilot's voice returned, the background noise was different. The distinctive whoop-whoop of helicopter rotors filtered through encryption algorithms. "Chapman Operations, Rescue 17 on secure channel. We have located the wreckage, but this is unlike any aircraft I've seen. Appears to be some kind of advanced prototype or heavily modified platform. No visible markings, unusual configuration." Rodriguez looked at Kestrel expectantly. This was the moment of truth, the point where theoretical knowledge would either prove valuable or expose her to even greater scrutiny. "Ask about the power plant," Kestrel said quietly. "Ghost Rider aircraft used modified engines, usually hybrid configurations that wouldn't appear in standard manuals." Rodriguez keyed the radio. "Rescue 17, can you describe the engine configuration?" "Stand by, Chapman Operations." A long pause filled with rotor noise and muffled conversations. "Appears to be twin-engine setup, but the nacelles are unlike anything in our recognition guides. Possibly turbofan configuration with what looks like additional intake modifications." Kestrel felt a chill run down her spine. Modified turbofans with additional intakes were consistent with the stealth-modified aircraft she'd flown during her time with the Ghost Riders. Someone had not only obtained similar technology, but was operating it in her former area of operations. "Any sign of the pilot?" Rodriguez asked. "Negative on pilot location. However, we found something else that's concerning. There appears to be evidence of post-crash activity. Someone was here after the impact." The implications hit both women simultaneously. A downed pilot was one thing. A potential enemy capture was something else entirely. If the pilot had survived the crash and been taken by hostile forces, the mission parameters had just expanded from search and rescue to something far more complex and dangerous. Rodriguez was already reaching for another phone, this one connected to higher levels of command authority. But Kestrel was thinking about the tactical implications. The knowledge that someone with advanced aircraft was operating in territory she knew better than almost anyone alive. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying new urgency, "if this is what I think it is, your rescue teams are walking into something much bigger than an aircraft accident, and they might not be equipped for what they're going to find." The truth was beginning to emerge from the shadows of compartmentalized secrecy, but that truth carried dangers that neither woman had fully anticipated. In the mountains surrounding Fob Chapman, events were unfolding that would test everything Kestrel had learned about survival, loyalty, and the price of keeping secrets in a war that had no clear boundaries between friend and enemy. The rescue helicopter's report changed everything in the operations bunker. Captain Rodriguez immediately began coordinating with higher command, while Kestrel found herself facing the reality that her carefully constructed anonymity was dissolving with each passing minute. The knowledge she tried to bury was becoming operationally critical, whether she wanted it to be or not. "Rescue 17, Chapman Operations," Rodriguez transmitted. "Can you determine direction of travel for the post-crash activity? Any indication of how many individuals were involved?" The pilot's voice crackled back through the encryption. "Chapman Operations. Tracks indicate at least 3 individuals, possibly more. Direction appears to be northeast, heading toward the Pakistan border. Professional movement patterns. These weren't local opportunists." The Pakistan border. Kestrel knew that terrain intimately from her Ghost Rider missions. The region was a maze of valleys and ridges that provided countless hiding places for anyone who understood the geography. If the downed pilot had been taken by professionals, they would be extremely difficult to track and even harder to rescue. Rodriguez switched to another frequency, this one connecting directly to Special Operations Command. "SOCOM, this is Chapman Operations. We have a developing situation requiring immediate escalation. Downed aircraft with possible pilot capture by organized hostile forces." While Rodriguez coordinated the expanding search effort, Kestrel studied the tactical display with growing unease. The crash site was located in a valley system she recognized, one that provided multiple escape routes into Pakistan's tribal areas where Pakistani government authority was limited, and American forces couldn't operate without creating international incidents. Her knowledge of the terrain was becoming increasingly relevant, but sharing that knowledge would require admitting things about her past that she'd sworn never to reveal. The Ghost Riders had operated in legal gray areas, conducting missions that pushed the boundaries of international law and military authorization. Some of those missions had taken her deep into Pakistani territory on assignments that officially never happened. The secure phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated an incoming classified communication. Rodriguez answered with military precision. "Chapman Operations, Captain Rodriguez." The voice on the other end was different this time, older, carrying the authority of senior command. "Captain Rodriguez, this is General Morrison, CENTCOM Operations. I understand you have personnel on base with relevant specialized knowledge." Rodriguez glanced at Kestrel. "Yes, sir. Staff Sergeant Navarre, formerly assigned to classified air operations." "Put her on the line, Captain." The handset felt heavy in Kestrel's grip as she accepted it from Rodriguez. General Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions in compressed timeframes. "Sergeant Navarre, I'm going to ask you some direct questions, and I need direct answers. Lives may depend on your honesty." "Yes, sir." "Are you familiar with the terrain in the crash area from previous operations?" The question cut straight to the heart of everything she'd been trying to forget. "Yes, sir. Extensive familiarity." "Can you identify likely extraction routes and safe houses in the region?" Another step toward the truth she'd been avoiding. "Yes, sir. Multiple routes and locations." "Good. Captain Rodriguez is going to brief you on current rescue operations, and you're going to provide tactical consultation. "This is not a request, Sergeant. This is a direct order under operational necessity." The line went dead, leaving Kestrel holding a silent handset and facing a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. The military had ways of compelling cooperation that went far beyond normal disciplinary channels, especially when classified operations and missing personnel were involved. Rodriguez took the handset back and immediately began pulling up detailed topographical maps on the tactical display. The terrain features appeared in sharp relief: ridgelines, valleys, river systems, and the scattered dots that represented known settlements and installations. "Show me," Rodriguez said simply. Kestrel approached the display with the reluctance of someone opening old wounds. But as her finger traced the valleys and ridges she'd once known as intimately as her own reflection, professional instincts began to override personal reservations. "Primary extraction route would be through this valley system," she began, indicating a series of connected watersheds that led toward the Pakistani border. "Natural concealment, multiple branching options, difficult for aircraft to maintain surveillance." She marked several locations with the display's annotation tools. "These positions offer good defensive terrain if they're planning to make a stand. This one here has cave systems that could hide a small force indefinitely." Rodriguez studied the marked locations with professional interest. "How do you know about the cave systems?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Kestrel met the captain's gaze steadily, making a decision that would define everything that followed. "Because I've been inside them," she said. "Ghost Rider missions took us into Pakistani territory on multiple occasions. We mapped these systems for potential use as emergency shelters or observation posts." The admission felt like stepping across a threshold she could never return from. Rodriguez's expression shifted as the implications became clear. Kestrel hadn't just flown classified missions. She'd participated in operations that violated Pakistani sovereignty and international law. "How many times?" Rodriguez asked quietly. 17 verified penetrations over an 18-month period," Kestrel replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. "Deep reconnaissance, target assessment, some direct action missions." The numbers represented more than simple statistics. Each penetration had been a carefully planned violation of national boundaries, justified by intelligence requirements that existed in the shadowy spaces between official policy and operational necessity. The Ghost Riders had been America's deniable assets, conducting missions that couldn't be acknowledged even if they succeeded. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of having someone with such extensive classified knowledge sitting in her operations bunker. Finally, she reached for the secure phone again. "I think we need to elevate this conversation," she said. "What you've just told me changes everything about this rescue mission." As Rodriguez dialed higher command, Kestrel stared at the tactical display and felt the weight of her past settling around her shoulders like a familiar but unwelcome coat. The mountains she'd once known as hunting grounds were calling her back, demanding payment for the secrets she'd carried out of them. The secure line connected with the familiar electronic warble of high-level encryption. This time, when Rodriguez spoke, her words carried the gravity of someone reporting a fundamental shift in operational parameters. "CENTCOM operations, this is Chapman Base. We have new intelligence regarding the downed aircraft situation that requires immediate command attention." General Morrison's voice returned with the sharp focus of someone whose day had just become significantly more complicated. "Chapman Base, General Morrison. What's the nature of this new intelligence?" Rodriguez looked at Kestrel, seeking permission for what came next. Kestrel nodded. There was no point in half measures now. "Sir Staff Sergeant Navarre has."